Welcome back, everybody. This episode's with Bob Bonniol, the founder of Mode Studios in Seattle, a longtime inspiration to me. He's kind of a legend in the live show production industry, being at the forefront of new media technologies as they made their way onto the stage. Coming up in the theatrical world, he was an early adopter of projection mapping and the use of complex control systems to achieve new effects that pushed the envelope on Broadway and later in the concert touring world. Our conversation was a short one, but a fun one. I've been waiting for a while to have a chance to talk with Bob, and it was fun to just sit back and see where things went. Evidently, we're both big fans of futurism because that's exactly where this conversation ended up. I'll let you listen to it, and we'll get right into it. I hope you enjoy. So how's it going? How you doing?
I don't know, ups and downs, right? To be perfectly honest, somewhat dismayed, demoralized, and disaffected by politics, by the incredible racism and intolerance that seems to be rooting and growing. I'm fucking over the plague.
Yeah, man, we're getting hit by all things from all directions. It's kind of crazy. It feels like things are falling apart right now.
It does, and I really, really miss being with groups of people in a space and witnessing art together.
Yeah,
You know, and we have like at the studio and in work, like we have things we're doing, and you know, I can't claim an existential crisis like I'm about to lose the place where we live or like we can't eat. And so I have to temper anything I'm saying by acknowledging I know that there are other people dealing with that, but people I know. But at the same time, it's just like it's hard to try to be functional right now. It's hard to try to think aspirationally or artistically or creatively. I mean, it's present circumstances are a bit of a beatdown.
Yeah, they are, and it's kind of crazy. It's, you know, the question of like, what can you do, you know, and the way I think of it, I've always tried to think of it is in like spheres of influence. You know, it's so easy to get overwhelmed and just demoralized when you think about things that are too far out of your own sphere of influence. You know what I mean? And it's like the people who are immediately around me. We have this little art community here that I'm part of, and that, you know, is a very big part of my life. And, you know, that makes up kind of like my closest family unit outside of my immediate family. You know what I mean? So it's like me and myself, like, what do I need to survive right now in this minute? And then like, what does my little group need? What can I do? Because I have influence over that. You know, you can control that. It's hard to, the further removed from your own sphere of influence you go, the harder it is to feel in control. I think that can be fucking crazy, especially now with the forest fires. You know, it's like, well, COVID meet social unrest meet forest fires. It's like, fuck, can't even go outside anymore.
It's like,
at least down here, you guys got some rainforests. I can see it out your window.
Well, yeah, we do, but we have fires on the Olympic Peninsula. We have fires in the Cascades. We have the same situation. Nowhere, not currently at the scale that Northern and Central California have going on. But it gets. I'm actually surprised we haven't. Like last summer, all of August was just smoke.
Yeah, did you feel it, or did you get it in Seattle?
Because we had fires. There were fires in British Columbia. There were fires in California.
Yeah.
And we seem to be sampling everybody's smoke.
Well, you know, what could I say? We just, you know, we send it all over the place. I'm sure, you know, Europe and China, they're like, oh, that smells like California fires right now. Yeah, man, it's crazy. I'm really glad that we're able to sit down and do this. You know, it's like I started this podcast about a year and a half ago. I only do about an episode a month, so I haven't done, you know, a ton. But you were definitely one of the people on my short list. I was like, oh man, I gotta find an excuse to catch Bob and sit down with you.
Well, thanks. I mean, I hope that I can deliver an interesting conversation today. I mean, I do have to confess that today, in that sine wave I was kind of describing of like, ups and downs. Today's been a bit of a down day. I started the day and tried to get things done, and by mid morning, I gave up. Like I just said, okay, today I'm gonna go drive rods out in the garden and tie the sunflowers back, and uh,
Isn't that cathartic though? Like, when you go outside and you put your hands in the dirt, and we have a little garden too. It's nothing, it's nothing crazy. It's very humble, but it's like a succulent garden, and it brings green to our otherwise very like clinical space. And I find that working in that garden gives me such a sense of satisfaction and relaxation. It's like unplugging, right? That's important, man. And some days are like that. Sometimes you're just like, fuck it, I can't even deal.
well, and it's true, and I think that especially now we kind of have to. You have to put your own mask on before you can turn and help the person next to you put their mask on. Is what they say on the plane, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's like, and it's so. I think the same thing is going on, and I know of three surefire ways to shift my mindset if I'm in a fugue state of bad, right?
Mm,
One of them is to do some kind of physical activity, like
yeah,
walk the dog. For me, I enjoy swinging kettlebells, like doing that, getting my heart rate up. So,
yeah,
move your body, move your brain. A
yeah.
friend of mine likes to say, second, the garden thing, getting outside, breathing the air, touching growing things.
Mm.
And three, going and finding somebody else who has a problem and being of service to them.
Man,
Those three things guaranteed will shift your mindset.
yeah, absolutely. That's so funny that you said that. I was talking to a friend about that the other day, about how helping other people is, it's like, there's this debate. It's like, is true altruism truly altruistic because it has such a benefit to you personally? And I feel like, just like exercise, right? The people who realize that, um, it's almost like you feel bad for the people who don't understand that, because they never get to that place where they can reach that level of like self activation. Do you know what I mean? Like helping other people is a fundamental part of being human. And if you miss that, you're missing a part of being human.
Oh, absolutely. And I get what you're saying about, like, it's too bad that more people don't figure that out. It's uh there's a funny saying in the business. A lot of people know that I'm a recovering addict. And it's like, and so at LDI, when everybody gets together at the Circle Bar, everybody makes the joke that I'm like the industry's designated driver. Right? But one part of that, one beautiful gift of recovery for me, is that I experienced the bottom, right? Like
Sure.
I lost just about everything.
Yeah.
And then I had to look at my causes and conditions. I had to start being honest with myself. And then I started being exposed to these tools, like the things we're talking about.
Hmm.
And I would say that more often than not, I have had this discussion with other people in recovery from various things, and there's this common conception that it's too bad that more people don't like have this terrible thing that happens to them, because it then opens your eyes to, like, these ideas of service, right?
Well, that concept is like dynamic range, man. And it's like, life is nothing without dynamic range. Like, if you're just like kicking it even keel your entire life, not only has it got to be pretty boring, it's like you miss out on, yeah, like the diversity of experience.
It's true.
I had no idea that you were an addict, Bob. That's cool to know. It gives me like, yeah, perspective.
Well, yeah, and as such, I experience that dynamic range. I clip, right? I
Yeah,
go too high and I get
right.
too low. And then
Yeah.
and then I want to make the situation better, or I want to be numb, right? So I actually have to put a compressor on my dynamic, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Which is okay for me, right? It's because I know what it is to travel to the top and to the bottom, and I have
yeah.
that as an artist, as an author, as a human being. I have that perspective now. And so
Yeah.
I have that as a resource, but I don't need to. I need to be careful with my dynamic range, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's also true. It's like you can definitely like it's like swinging a kettlebell, right? It's like you can definitely like throw out your shoulder. You can just yeah, it's about balance. But yeah, yeah, it's about balance, right? It's like if you have too much dynamic range, you're gonna have problems. But I think that the same is true for like moderating all elements of your life into like the finest of minutia. You know, it's like you can kind of drown yourself in that mundanity. You
So
know,
what? So where do you put yourself on that spectrum? I mean, I've known you for quite a while, and I mean, in terms of like, if we look at like kind of like your career path and the things you've done and you've been interested, man, I mean, you've had some wide swings. Like,
yeah.
how do you set boundaries for your dynamic range?
You know, man, I feel like that is a fundamental part of growing up. You know, I think that you know, my 20s were definitely a shit show. Starting digital ambience was a huge help because it gave me a real focus and drive. You know, I've always been like, I've always pushed hard, but I think the problem lies when you don't know what you're pushing hard towards, and you just go off the rails in one way or the other. And you know, when I met you back, it must have been like 13, 14 years ago, at least 10,
Yeah.
right? And
Oh yeah. I think more like the former. No, I think it was like 13, 14.
yeah, yeah. And I was definitely doing the concert touring thing, and I didn't really know what was going on. And then when that you know when I moved to the Bay, I stopped touring, and I was just like, I'm gonna I'm gonna live somewhere. I live in the Bay, and did that thing. And yeah, it was a real balancing thing to start my own company. And I think that combined with also the physical activity, right? Learning that it's a mind body, right? Not just like a mind, and you can't just ignore your body, and that helps even you out a lot,
Yes.
right? Yeah, that's cool that you're. I mean, you look like you exercise, and you can tell like by looking at somebody, you're like, oh yeah, you know this person's active, and that
Yeah, I mean, I can't claim to be like buff or, but
you don't have to
here's
be,
the
man.
gift it gives me. I can move well. Like I'm
Yeah,
comfortable. I don't get up and go, oh, it's like I just
right.
I just get up, and and they said, isn't it interesting? They say that's a absolute precursor is the wrong word, but antecedent to longevity is your ability to get fully down on the floor and fully back up without using your hands.
Interesting, interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, being long lived, it's more than just a lifespan, right? They call it health span. And it's about
Yeah,
the duration of
yeah.
time that you are like healthy and active and you know, like a full functioning human being during your life. Like that's what counts, right? And that's so linked to physical movement and exercise. It's really important.
What do you think of Elon Musk's news this week about the Neuralink
Neuralink.
thing? Like, what do you think of the Neuralink thing in general?
Oh my God, man, that's such a rabbit hole because I admire him as a futurist. Like my brain goes to the same places, you know, like he's in a position, he's doing things about it, but it's like, you know, you look at the trajectory of computing, right? It's like when we started this journey back in the 40s or earlier, you know, these things were buildings, and then eventually they became rooms, and then they were on your desk, and then they were on your lap, and then they were next to your head in like the cell phone form, and then they were on your face, they're on your wrist, they're going in your brain, man. Like you don't have to be like a psychic to see this. You know, you don't have to be Nostradamus to see the trajectory of computation and where it's going. I think that he is thinking very big picture about very important possibilities, namely the potential for our our tools to outstrip us in terms of their ability to to be cognizant. And I think that you know, like his if you've listened to him speak, it's fascinating. He's a very strange guy. He's very fascinating. And I think that his concept of taking like the human brain, which is essentially our amygdala, which is like our reptile brain. We want to fight and fuck and flee and eat. These really basic drives, and then we put a logic center on top of that. Your frontal cortex, and then now all of a sudden you can, you think and you can do math, and you think that's in charge. It's like that's not in charge, man. We're still being driven by our amygdalas. And he's like, well, let's just slap a third layer on there, man. Let's interface computers so that bandwidth issue between, like our thumbs are no longer the bottleneck. And yeah, it's fascinating.
It
We
is
live in the future. We live in fucking sci-fi, man.
no, and that's a rabbit hole I willingly go down. I think that there's a compelling argument that if you want to talk about it in terms of evolutionary frameworks, that maybe the point of us is as a stepping stone to an evolution of intelligent technology.
Yeah,
We're not, the smart monkeys are not the primary end of the chain. The smart monkeys are here to enable maybe, conscious silicon.
yeah. Well, the change of state and self-evolution. And when you start to look, I've been really interested in like bioscience and like medical science, especially like genomics.
Yep.
And I think that if we have been living in like the digital revolution for the last 50 years, it's like the next step is the genomic revolution, and what that means. It's like, who even knows, man? Like when we can edit our own source code, all bets are off.
Yeah, because then the artist in me is of course fascinated by the aesthetic adaptations. I
I
want
know.
a tail, like I want a tail, man. I would be down for that. And that, many of a lot of the sci-fi that I get super into, they talk about human adapts, like
Yeah.
that through genomics they adapt to low G environments, or they adapt to super hot worlds, or they adapt to look like a cat.
Yeah,
Right
yeah.
now, I'm down. Right, like
Yeah, I mean, you think
part of me, I start thinking about Neuralink, and I am very prone to people like saying to people, "Sign me up. If I could go cyborg, let's do it." Right? Like I'm like, but then I'm a little bit further along the track of mortality maybe than some. So for me, I'm like, yeah, as soon as I can be downloaded, let's get that shit happening. Because
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another really interesting question. It's like, what would like if you download yourself? What's his name? Not Asimov, the futurist who's working for Google. What the fuck is his name? Anyway,
Kurzweil.
yeah, Kurzweil. He's like, I want to be downloaded. And it's like, I don't know if I do, man. I am all about prolonging health span, right? And I think that there are lots of ways that we can like extend the duration and the lifespan of our vehicles, like our meat vehicles.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's
I think I don't know what would consciousness look like outside of a body. It's like it's really hard to answer that question, because even thinking about like what happens when you put yourself into a sensory depth tank. I don't know if you've ever done that. I've done it once, and it's equivalent to like a psychedelic experience. It's really fucking crazy. And it's like when you remove all inputs, it's like it's like you are your inputs. So that VR simulation better be pretty fucking good. Go insane.
Yeah, there is that, right? And that's the flip side, the bad side. I'm into the health span idea.
Yeah.
It's and I like I'm on like peptide therapies and HGH precursors, and I do testosterone therapies, and like I've always like, I remember back in the 90s being like, oh, I need to take acetylcholine because it's I was into nootropics and
Acetylcholine.
stuff. Yeah,
I'm very much in that space, man. Like, Dr. Sinclair, David Sinclair.
yeah.
He is a fascinating guy, man, and he is doing some pretty fascinating research. We don't even have to go into it, but it's like, yeah, like I'm on that path, definitely. And I think, I can just say right now, I feel more healthy than I have ever felt in my life, and that's like my ability to run and just and be active, my endurance and yeah, I just feel better than I've ever felt. And I'm pushing 40. I'm like 38 years old, and it's like I feel better than I did when I was 28.
See, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's
I definitely feel better than I did when I was 28. But when I was 28, I was living in Vegas,
yeah, man.
and it was all a little harrowing. But
Where are you from?
Rhode Island,
Are you? You're East Coaster.
yeah,
I think I knew that. I'm from Boston.
yeah.
Well, actually, New Hampshire, New Hampshire originally.
I
But
grew up in Bristol and in Cranston, Rhode Island. Went to school in Providence.
yeah,
So that's if I'm in Rhode Island for more than say 90 minutes, I start talking like I'm from fucking Rhode Island too. Yo, let's go up down Federal Hill. That guy's got an eye rock.
fucking A, bruh.
Yeah,
See, I could do the Bostonian accent.
yeah.
I
You
got
can
that
kind
one
of you
down.
can kind of do the South Boston version of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So then, when did you move out to the West Coast?
Well, I just kind of always was heading west. I had at first when I first left Rhode Island, I really, really wanted to go on a tour, right? And I met the woman who would be my wife, Colleen. She was the head electrician at Trinity Repertory at the time. She gave me my first job in the theater when I was 17. And when I met her, she had just come off the road with U2. Like
Wow.
she had done the Unforgettable Fire tour, I think it was. This was like 87.
Hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I want to do that. And she was like, you are not good enough. So I really wanted to go on tour. So eventually I got hired to tour, but it was with the bus and truck of the Sound of Music, right? Like a non-union. If you had a check for $10,000 and a cafetorium, we would load our show in and do it. And, it was a whole bunch of one-nighters. But I went out on that tour, and when I got done with that tour, I moved to New York City. I dropped out of college, went to New York, and said, okay, this was it. I was going to leverage that. And then I did a bunch more touring, and eventually I got to do some bigger tours and stuff. But then from New York, I moved to Vegas, and then from Vegas, I moved to Seattle. So.
Okay, interesting. You skip California. That's
Well, I feel comfortable saying that I have lived in Los Angeles because there have been periods of like 6 to 9 months of contiguous time. When you've lived in a city for 9 months, you've kind of lived there. Like
yeah,
you
absolutely.
you could credibly say, yeah, I live there. So, I love LA. I'm not one of the people that hates LA. I like it just fine.
LA is fine, man. I wouldn't want to live there, honestly. Like I lived there for a little while, and I got nothing against LA, but it's just my vibe is very much Northern California. And I think honestly, if circumstances had been different and I ended up in Portland or Seattle, I would have stayed there. I feel Seattle has a kinship with Boston, right? The Northeast. It's like everybody's a little bit pissed off at the weather.
Like I-90 to I-90, right?
Yeah, right.
It's a road link too. No, I agree, and it's funny because all that touring. The moment I got to the Pacific Northwest, I knew. I'm like, oh, that's where I'm going. Like eventually, that was where I was going to land.
Yeah,
and it just took me. It took me a while for that to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So you toured then. You toured out of the East Coast and over to the West Coast.
Well, yeah, I did a lot of these kind of non-union Broadway shows, and
was it theatrical or concert?
There were a couple little rock and roll things in the midst of there too. I did this short, very chaotic tour with Susie and the Banshees back in like '89. But I mainly did this Broadway stuff. I toured with some dance companies like with Momix and Pilobolus. And it would take, it was only after I'd moved to Seattle. It was only when I designed my first concert tour that I went out and toured and did a concert tour.
Wow, that's interesting. So you designed a tour before and that means that tour must have been very theatrical.
Well, it's a funny and interesting. So Colleen and I were designing Parsifal for Seattle Opera, and this was in 2002-ish, I think, 2002, around 2002. and we were doing all kinds of, like, we were doing crazy blended projection things off axis, and then, like, the AV vendors were like, you can't do that, and we're like, we think we can, and we were kind of inventing our way out of problems we were creating. But one of the things that happened on that show is we had a backup system of Verilites with some glass gobos in them in case the projection crapped out. And the guy who was programming those lights for us was named Chris Mader, and he was at the time the lighting designer for a Vancouver bar band that was about to explode called Nickelback. And hey, so he said, listen, we're about to do our first big arena tour, and the band really wants to do a production design that's more, and he said, theatrical. Now, one of the funny things about that was I was convinced that we were getting a gig designing a tour for a different band, Nickel Creek. Right? Which is maybe more my vibe, because I'm a deadhead of old.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, Nickel Creek, that's dope. That'll be fun. But then it was Nickelback, and it was the Silver Side Up tour. It was their first big tour, and then consequently, I went on to design another 6 tours for them. So yeah, but they brought me in because I was the theatrical designer, a guy who came from opera, so I had to be serious,
right?
To do this show. And
well, I think there's something to be said for coming at concert touring and concert stage design can be so, like, I don't even know what the right word for it is, but like aggro, for lack of a better term, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like when I was touring, what I wished was that there was more room for like free-form creativity that wouldn't be brushed off as too, like, emotional. Do you know what I mean? Like, the language of stage design is, at least from the concert touring perspective, is very aggressive.
No, totally. And there were other bands that came along. There were, like, I then got a crack at a lot of the bands that opened for Nickelback over the years, designing various things. And, some of those bands were they, you would talk to the guys in the band, and they would just, like, they wanted you to put the foot on the gas at the moment the show started, let's drop a kabuki and then blah, and then let's say blah, for another, 2 hours, 15 minutes.
It's like, no, man,
and
got to have dynamic range.
Dynamic range, right? And those gigs did not interest me. And
right.
And and if I wandered into one that was like that, I would do it and then be done with it.
Yeah.
So, one thing I can always, you can have a lot of subjective discussion about Nickelback and Nickelback's music, but as a band, and by the way, I'll just come out and say, I'll confess it, I really like them. But then again, as an artist, I kind of have to fall in love with the things I work on.
Sure.
So, I love the Broadway shows I've done. I love Nickelback. But one thing you can say about those guys as a band is they were constantly interested at elevating the production, and not elevating it in a way that they wanted everything at 100 miles an hour for every minute. Every time they gathered an audience in a room, they wanted the audience to be able to say that show was better than the last one they did.
Right.
And
yeah, man, it's rare when you have a client, a band that you're working with that is truly. Tool was like that. Justin Timberlake was like that. Right? It's like,
yeah, Justin JT, absolutely. Tool too. Like, those guys are like committed artists in terms of constantly wanting to elevate their game, constantly expose their audiences to a new form of consciousness shift.
Yeah, and they were also very progressive when it came to the visual elements. Like I toured with Tool one tour. It was only one, right? And I worked with Breck and Rich
Haggerty,
yeah,
he's
and
awesome.
he was, yeah, man, he was. I consider him kind of like my mentor in terms of somebody who showed me how visuals and lighting design were the same thing, right? It's all one visual experience.
Yes.
Yeah, he's a genius. Like I haven't talked to him in a long time. I would love to,
Yeah,
but
the way that Breck thought from the very beginning about controlling video and controlling lighting in an integrated way and
yeah.
expressing those thoughts in an integrated way, he was out in front of so many people.
Yeah, yeah. He was I mean, so were you though, man. You were a pioneer when it came to projection design and in that era using projection as a stage element. I remember, being so inspired by some of the work that I saw when I first met you. I was just like, damn, who is this guy? Like it's so cool. I came from the VJing perspective, but I wanted so much to be in the production design arena, but using the tools that I was in love with from the VJ world. And that's actually how we met, like during the LDI years and
Yeah.
like, yeah, man. And that and Josh Fleitel, who's another fucking mad scientist, I just listened to another podcast with him. It was like LD. Fuck, I can't even remember what the name of the. Oh, what the hell? Yeah, just another podcast that he was on. I got to hear him talk for a while, and that was really cool to see what he.
Josh is absolutely my brother, and he's been a student for me at Cal Arts, and then he's been a collaborator on numerous occasions.
Yeah,
I have a deep appreciation for how committed Josh is to his art.
yeah, man.
You know,
And he goes full in, like he goes down the rabbit hole. It's funny, like the personality of like an artist engineer. You know what I'm talking about? It's like those serious fucking wizards who are just they're artists, but they're also like the smartest people that you've ever met. And like Breck is like that too. He's just like he'll find a problem and he'll just be like, "This is my world," and he'll, you know what I mean?
yeah.
It's cool to surround yourself with those kind of. It's very inspiring.
Oh, definitely. And I know a whole bunch of people like that who and those people are my constant collaborators, like Josh, like Pablo Molina is another cat who I've done a lot of work with, who is like he's a technological, he's this incredible intersection of technology and artistry.
Yeah,
Like Sean Cagney
yeah, man.
is
Sean
another
Cagney.
incredible mind for putting together technology and artistry. Um, Florian
Is he,
Florian Mosley.
I just saw him.
Yeah.
I just hung out with Florian not too long ago. We did a like a class on this new software called Smode.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah. Right on. It's kind of notchy, isn't it?
it is, man. So we've adopted that as our weapon of choice for volumetric pixel mapping because it is so Disguise will not allow you to import 3D models and import arrays of pixels. With Smode, you can do that. And really, it's a small development group. We're good friends with them, and we're just like, hey, this is what we need, and they made it.
I love
But
that.
yeah, so Florian came out to the labs here in Berkeley, and he was part of this class that we had. We flew in Vincent, one of the Smode developers, and he did like a whole week-long class. And I didn't even know he was coming. I was like, holy shit, I know you. But yeah,
I love
it's
being
just
in the room with guys like that, and women like that too, because there are some women I work with who have that same affinity, and that they're the way that like all of those people we just talked about, and I would lump you into this classification too, the way that you all think, right, and the way that you all synthesize, a technological viewpoint and opportunity into an artistic expression. And a lot of people, and the funny thing is, like, in the pantheon of people you work with, there'll be people who feel like some reservation about, like, oh, Josh seems, you know your guys over there seem touchy or something, and I'm like, oh no, they are thinking at speeds that you can't quite comprehend, and
yeah.
so to them you just seem to be moving a lot slower.
Well, everybody plays a role, right? When you have a project, everybody plays like a good project, man, is like a Swiss Army knife. It's like you've got somebody that fits all the different roles. And like, you know, yeah, like that's a role. And it's like in our industry, that is a serious asset. Like to have somebody who kind of just can wrap their head around whatever the fuck you throw at them. And they're
Yeah.
just like, oh yeah, I understand how this works. I see, I'm going to like, even if they don't know it, they'll learn it.
Well, that's exactly it. And it seems like a simple question, and it doesn't seem like it would be too daunting. But to say that hasn't been done before, let's go figure out how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you ask that of 90% of people, they will not be able to do it. And it will not be because they don't have capacity. It will be because they are afraid.
Right.
They're afraid to go out there. They're afraid to walk out on that tightrope without knowing that it's attached to the other side.
Right.
And it's like
Yeah,
a
man.
lot of those people do. And look, I am going to say this out loud. I don't think like I'm a super geniusy artist. I don't. I think that what I am really good at is putting together those teams you're talking about. Like
Yes, dude.
about hearing a challenge that has to do with story or has to do with thought or has to do with communication from a client or from a collaborator or something. And then what I'm really good at is saying, okay, I need that person, that person, that person, that person, and that person. They are going to represent exactly the right pieces of the puzzle here.
Yeah, well, that's another role in I don't even know what you call it. It's like kind of a project manager, but really it's just the person who assembles the pieces to make a project reality, right? And that's as that is arguably the most important part, right? Because you need that center post that everything orbits around. And yeah, man, I understand that 100%.
Well, and it's important for that center post to also, and this is the other thing that I've had the good luck to see, I seem to have this skill, is I seem to be able to listen and understand in my head what success looks like.
Right.
Like to be able to listen to a producer or listen to an architect or
Mm,
listen to a brand activation client and have them describe something, and then I can see and feel and hear in my mind's eye and ear uh, what they want, right?
yeah.
Even when they can't quite describe it. And then the other part that I seem to have is that I have an awareness that I can go find all these people who are way better than me at what they do
Right.
and put them in a room together.
Man, I've have you ever heard of the list? It's a group called Ooh Shiny.
I don't think I have.
Bob, I'm gonna add you to this list, man. I got added a couple years ago, and it is an email list, like an OG email list, but there are people from like all the new media arts companies have some kind of presence on this list. Like all of the fucking badass forward thinking technologists, whether it's computer vision or AI or projection mapping or just creative coding, interactivity. It's a list that there are constantly discussions that are blowing my mind in terms of people just pushing into unknown areas. And it's an email list, man. And you can just join in, and it's mostly people's personal email addresses, so you don't really even know like who.
Oh, I love that. I love everything about what you're describing.
Dude, it's so fucking cool, man. And the community really is just a very dynamic, diverse, interesting community. I'll add you. I'll send you an email after the podcast
Yeah,
and,
right
and
on.
get you on. But yeah, that's actually been how I've found a number of the people that we've worked with on the last few projects, is just by posting to this list and saying, "Hey, I have this challenge. Who's around?" So, are you guys working on interesting pieces now, like during all of this crazy shit, or is things kind of scaled back?
Yeah, we've got interesting things. We're working on some big XR projects. XR seems to be super white hot right now, which makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're doing a couple XR projects for some big consumer electronics brands in lieu of what they would have normally done for CES, probably.
Hmm.
So we're working on that. We're working on a lot of like virtual event production, which a lot of people have pivoted to that. But where we've kind of pivoted differently is to say, now look, what an event is really an in the moment act of community creation.
Yeah.
It's not about putting a great piece of content and ensuring that eyeballs can witness it.
Mm.
It's not just about that. Right.
Right.
It has to be about giving an audience an ability to interact with each other and to give
Yeah.
back and the energy and that the feedback loop of that content broadcast. So we've been building platforms to do that, and then by doing that, we have inadvertently got into building community-based platforms, that are bigger than just virtual events platforms. Because some of what we brought to the virtual events platforms, people were like, "Hey, could we have this in a sort of perpetual way and use it to foster
Right.
community?" And we're like, yeah, sure. And then I think maybe the most interesting thing we're working on now is it's a new musical show that is some of the peeps who created Trans-Siberian Orchestra.
Oh, such a good show.
Such a good show, right? And it's this one guy in particular, Bob Kinkle, and this woman Dina Fanai, who were part of that posse. They've come up with this other show called Avalona, which is sort of same epic quality as TSO, but it's rooted kind of in the world of, like, I don't know if you've heard of or are familiar with the book The Mists of Avalon, which is it's
Mm.
the Arthurian legend told from the viewpoint of the women.
Interesting.
It's
No, I haven't.
fucking awesome. It's a great book. It's a great piece of fantasy fiction.
Yeah.
But it's a fantastic. It's super smart writing. The characters are incredible. But it's also what Dina and Bob did is Dina kind of took it and overlaid it in with some of her life experiences. So we were looking at building out something that was going to probably look very TSO-ish, like big, epic, mythic level production. But with COVID, we were just getting into the point where we are going to start workshopping things. But with the uncertainty that came with the plague, um,
Yeah.
there was a kind of a general sense of what do we do now? And I said, I think what we do now is we take this into Unreal Engine and
Oh my God.
we make it an interactive experience you can have in a container that you might call a game, but it's not a game. Right.
So listen, man, what you're describing is fascinating to me. Burning Man is about to do this virtual event, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
it's in this platform that's kind of sort of a little bit like Second Life, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my friends are they're rolling out their installations as virtual pieces for this, and it's such a cool concept.
The metaverse, right?
Yeah, man, it really it gets into very sci-fi territory where you have this second reality where you're hosting events and meeting up with your friends and experiencing life.
Well, look,
Essentially.
I think if we look at what Travis Scott did in Fortnite, which was kind of a precursor to that in some ways, and
Sure.
I appreciated also what Tomorrowland did. Although I have to say, I thought the production values were incredible, but I wanted, like with Tomorrowland, I wanted to be able to set up my own campsite on that island and invite my friends and create
Yeah.
and kind of do what you're describing is happening on the virtual playa, right?
Right.
So it's but that's very similar to that is what we're trying to do for Avalona is a little bit kind of an on rails experience in the sense that we want you to go through this in a certain tempo and with music and narrative that are making sense, but we're trying to give also a lot of agency in the experience. So it's, if you were going to try to intersect, Sleep No More with a massive multiplayer approach.
Well, that's kind of what I imagine in my mind, is like a Sleep No More vibe. How else would you do it? It's like you would, it's essentially, it's not a free for all, but there's like a performance happening, but then you've got all these entities that can kind of like wander around sandbox style and interact with whatever is around to interact with. You know, it's like you're not going to have a bunch of virtual people sitting in chairs looking at a stage. That's not how a virtual performance would go down. You know, it's like people would be wandering around and like playing with things.
Yeah.
And that's cool, man. That's a really cool paradigm
It
shift.
requires some deep thinking. I mean, at a certain level, you can look at it and say, how do we do this? And you're like, well, you do it like theater in the round in terms of like how you get people to focus where you want them to focus. But then you have to provide people with boundaries and keep them on track. And,
Well, you can do that with the game dynamics, though, right? Inside Unreal, you can set up. It's very much like creating a game.
it
right?
is. It is exactly the same mechanics to motivate people and to encourage them to move according to a certain narrative thread and in a certain timing.
Right.
It's just all the same shit that you would see in online multiplayer gaming for sure.
So, do you see us moving in, regardless of COVID, right? Like this has happened now. This is not going away.
Not
And
going.
the lessons, the technology that we develop in response to COVID will be there moving forward.
Yep.
So even if we go back to the theater, there's going to be this other thing, man, that exists now where people have kind of gotten used to these virtual events. Do you see theater like moving, at least branching off into a real virtual element of?
Oh, there's no question about it, because I think, look, we're going to see a re-collision of cinema into theater, and that collision is going to take place in gaming engines, and that's where we're going to define and find whole new forms of participatory storytelling. Zero question. These things are not going to be games. They're not going to be interactive movies. They're going to be something else, and they're going to be fundamentally theatrical in many cases. And I think that this is going to be a branch and a language and a venue for theater.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Isn't that so crazy, man? We're witnessing the birth of a new like meta industry, almost the same way that Convergence produced like whatever the fuck is happening in like on stages now. It's like you're seeing this new technology giving birth to a whole new industry.
Well, and if you think the technology players don't know that too, this whole tussle that's going on between Apple and Epic has got zero to do with Fortnite revenue. It's got everything to do with the fact that Epic owns the Unreal Engine, and therefore owns something that is potentially the operating system for all of the R's, AR, VR, MR, XR, and these kind of experiences. You're witnessing big software-driven media conglomerates like Apple and now Epic, who suddenly Epic woke up and they're like, wait a minute, architects are using Unreal, filmmakers are using Unreal, interactive experimental artists are using Unreal, and they twigged to it fast. They were like, oh, wait a minute, this goes, the implications of this economically, artistically, culturally are ginormous. Right. So
I don't know about this tussle. What's going on with Apple and Epic?
Basically, Apple has thrown Fortnite off of the App Store.
And so short-sighted.
And it's because Epic turned on in-app purchases in Fortnite that gatewayed you not through the App Store, but through their and they did it to precipitate this battle with Apple. Because Apple then said, well, that's not how it works for anybody, and we're not going to make an exception for you, so you're off the store. And literally, like, within 90 minutes, Fortnite hit with this incredibly slick media campaign where they remade the 1984 commercial from Apple, but in-game and Unreal, and now the thing on the screen was like a rotten apple saying, we are going to collect all the revenue. And the character comes running in with a giant, like, Fortnite hammer or something and throws it on the screen. It was the 1984 commercial again. They were out with that like in the same day it all went down. So clearly Epic was teeing this up, and they knew what Apple was going to do. But it doesn't have anything. It doesn't really. Fortnite is just the intro chapter for what is really a much larger battle between these entities. And Google piled into this fight immediately too, because they,
Really?
yes, Google threw Fortnite also off their app store. And again, this isn't about games. It's about Epic owning a platform that so many other developers create games with, you know.
Sure.
And what happened was, and the present situation is, it immediately went to court, and the judge gave Epic relief on Apple was going to X out anything to do with Unreal on all of those ecosystems, iOS, OS X, Mac OS, whatever they're calling it now. Which is, and the judge said, well, that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what Epic did with Fortnite. So no, you can't.
Yeah, I mean that would be a huge problem though, because if basically operating systems, like you still have to run the Unreal Engine within an operating
That's
system.
correct. You still have to. So there we see that this isn't about Fortnite. This is about these big software media conglomerates twigging to the knowing that this, what we are talking about, these new forms of participatory entertainment, communication, etc., these are going to happen via engines like Unreal or Unity or whatever Apple and Google are cooking up.
I was going to ask you about Unity because a lot of my peers use Unity to do these installations as their operating system for interactive pieces. We've used Unreal primarily to do previs and proof of concepts for clients, but Unity is another really full featured system to do these things in.
Well, and I think that the difference is that, this is, it's facile to say this. It's not entirely the right metaphor, but it's kind of like Unreal is Mac and
Yeah.
Unity is Linux.
Right, man. It totally
you get way under the hood with Unity, deep into the core wiring of things to do things. Whereas with Unreal, you can still do a lot. I mean, you can code your way into tons of stuff with Unreal.
100%.
Unreal has got kind of this approachable skin to it.
Yeah. And they also have that modular based environment. It's like that programming language. You like tile together blocks and blah, blah, blah. What's it called? It's called like Unreal Build or something.
Yeah. And,
yeah.
And I think, and I like all the different kind of packagings of Unreal now, like with Pixatope or Xsymmetry, or like there are people who are building skins for Unreal to adapt it to like production use for broadcast and stuff. And
interesting. I didn't know that.
But I have the same experience that you do. I know a lot of sort of deep technologically infused artists who are using Unity because they have that ability to go deeper under the hood with it and to bend it more specifically to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then but at the same time, Unreal and Epic have taken these steps to make Unreal accessible to architects, for instance.
Yeah.
Or accessible to, be on set during feature film stuff. So,
yeah.
I think that's the difference. I'm
so do you guys
sorry to say this, but I have an 8 o'clock.
Okay. That's fine, man. That's fine.
But which I've told them that I'm going to be with them shortly, so we don't have.
Don't sweat it. I'm really stoked that we got to sit down and we can do this again, man. Like definitely.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
This has been one of the more interesting conversations I've had.
Well, we kind of roamed all over the place. I'm sorry if I hijacked your podcast and started.
No, dude, that's what this is all about, man.
Volleying questions back at you, but
this is what it's all about.
Right on,
man. Well, listen, Bob, I'll let you go and do your thing, but yeah, thanks again.
Absolutely, let's do it again.
Absolutely, brother. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care. Be healthy.
All right, bye.
See ya.